Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Ramble. Today I want to talk about government efficiency and the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. A couple of months ago, I sent a note to my senator, Senator John Curtis. I was asking him to have Congress take actions to stop DOGE from cutting lots of programs that they had been cutting, such as USAID or custody of the IRS or some of these other ones. And I got back a reply from Senator Curtis, which surprised me. I haven't gotten replies back for many of the other messages that I've sent, where he said something to the effect of he approves of what DOGE is doing because he cares deeply about the government budget and cutting government waste. And he thinks Elon Musk is a proven businessman who has a good track record of these things. And the thought crossed my mind when I got that email. I work at a business school and I know something about business. And it was clear that Senator Curtis's idea of efficiency was a little bit different from mine. And so I thought it might be useful for me just to lay out how I think about government efficiency and how that's similar or different from how business can be efficient. So the first thing I want to talk about here is that no organization can be efficient without first deciding what the goal is. So in businesses, like the types of things that I'm teaching in my classes at BYU, the goal for a business is typically maximize shareholder wealth, sort of like increase profits in the long run. With a government, it's way less straightforward than that. We all collectively, as a society, in a democratic society, we kind of decide what we want the government to do. And it's not necessarily, or it really isn't, maximizing wealth of the government or wealth of certain citizens or even wealth of the nation overall. We want to maximize people's rights. We want to maximize people's happiness. That's a really messy process. It's not nearly as clearly defined as it is for business. And so you can't really think about government efficiency without first defining what the government's going to do, and that depends on the people. And this is why, and I think this is super important, this is why Congress holds the keys to the budget. This is why Congress decides what programs we run, not the executive branch, because Congress has much better representation of the broad US public. We could argue for a long time across all of us, do we want a bigger military or a smaller military? Do we want to provide Medicaid or not? And on and on and on. And we want Congress to argue over those things and eventually come to some sort of compromise to decide what the government's going to do. And we have to have that conversation before we can talk about if the government's efficient or not, because you can't define efficiency without first defining what your goal is. And I think this is where DOGE, right off the bat, just misses the point entirely. They're going through and just sort of cutting programs, but without any sort of discussion of does the public want that program or not? Do we like that program or not? It's really taking power out of your hands and my hands and putting it in the power of the executive branch to cut programs that, by and large, are quite popular or could be. So this is point number one, and probably the most important point that I want to make is this really needs to be in the hands of Congress. They should not surrender that power. And this is why I've been trying to put pressure on my senators and my representatives to claw this power back. I really think it goes against the spirit of the Constitution in terms of how we set the budget. The second point I wanted to make about government efficiency is there's really kind of two types of efficiency. One type of efficiency is let's find programs that we don't like or that aren't cost effective or something like that and kill the program entirely. And I think by and large, that's what DOGE has been focused on. But a different type of efficiency is let's take programs that we want to have, but might have some waste in them and make them more efficient by cutting out some of the waste. And I think DOGE has done very little of that kind of efficiency. It's kind of maybe my wife and I might sit down and look at our budget. And one thing, this literally happened to us recently, we realized we were paying for a subscription to Peacock when we could get it for free through our internet provider. And so we ended our subscription to Peacock entirely And that was like a full-on cut to the budget. It's like kind of wasteful spending that we shouldn't be doing at all. It was a program we didn't need. A different type of efficiency for our budget would be looking at our grocery bill and deciding, oh, maybe we could use more coupons, or maybe we could shop at a cheaper store, or maybe we should buy a little bit less junk food or something like that. You would never look at your personal budget and say, you know how we can save money? Let's stop buying groceries. You wouldn't do that, because then you end up going to a restaurant and spending even more money, or you end up starving. And like neither of those are like in our best benefit. I would say DOGE's approach is much more that second approach of taking whole programs and saying, oh, we're spending money there. Let's kill the program entirely or cripple it until it dies. Rather than looking at a program and saying, you know what, there's some waste here. Let's figure out how to get the waste out of the program to make it more efficient. And I think that that's really, really important, because to be honest, I'm sure that there's a lot of waste in the government. I too would love to have more efficiency in the government. And that's why I think this message kind of resonates with people. But I really think the way that DOGE has been going about it actually causes more harm than good. And in fact, there's a lot of programs out there that DOGE has been attacking that are going to actually harm our budget rather than help it, right? So if we think about which programs are efficient, which ones aren't, some of them are hard. Like, I can't really tell you if USAID, the kind of famous one that DOGE killed, is efficient or not. To me, that's up to the American public, and it's up to our representatives to decide, do we want to provide this type of foreign aid, this sort of soft power to further the government? That one's a little bit harder for me to tell, and this is why I want it to be left up to Congress. There's other ones, though, that are like clearly going to harm the government. So, for example, there's been the aim of DOGE is to cut about 20,000 jobs from the IRS. There are pretty good studies, one recent one that came out, and I'll put a link in the notes on YouTube if you want to find these studies, to all of the studies I'm going to mention in the next minute or two here. There was a recent study that came out. It was joint between, I believe, the Treasury Department and Harvard, showing that every dollar we spend at the IRS brings in somewhere between $6 and $12 of revenue. So if you cut jobs at the IRS, you can claim you're saving money, but you are definitely costing the government more money, because we're not going to do audits of well-off individuals who are not paying as many taxes as they should be paying. This will harm the budget. This will make the budget deficit worse. This is definitely not efficient. It's the opposite of efficient. And this is kind of what DOGE is trying to do. There's lots of other programs that kind of pretty easily pay for themselves just on a pure cost basis. So for example, there was another study that showed that every dollar we spend on providing health insurance for children returns about $1.78 to the government, because we reduce spending for those children later in life, because they get preventive care, they're healthier. And that's not even to mention the fact that the children are healthier and they're going to have happier lives. We're literally saving the government money by investing in this in the first place. Like, I'll just note, by the way, the Department of Health and Human Services just cut, I think it was about $2 billion in funding for vaccines for vulnerable children. This is definitely going to cost the government money. It is not saving us $2 billion. It's probably costing us something like $3.5 billion to do this. So there's a really super detailed paper that sort of covered, I think it was like 150 or 140 different government programs, detailing which ones are cost effective and which ones aren't. And it turns out some aren't and some are. So let me just be really clear on one thing too, which is I've been talking about sort of cost effective programs where if we spend $1, we actually bring in or save more than $1 for the government. Even programs that aren't cost effective in that way shouldn't necessarily be cut. Let me give one example. The US military doesn't directly sort of save the government money in like some measurable way, but none of us would say we should get rid of the military, because it's providing benefits that are sort of harder to measure, benefits that the US public has decided we would like to have. We like to have protection and security and world peace. So there's lots of other programs that aren't necessarily cost effective that I still think we should have. And I just wanted to point out the two examples of the IRS and the children's health insurance to show that there are clear examples where what DOGE is doing is definitely even harming the budget of the government, let alone not doing what sort of like the American public wants in general. So where does that leave us? The main point I want to make here is, first of all, the power of the budget should be in the hands of Congress, not the executive branch. I love the idea of government efficiency. I'm not opposed to the idea of a Department of Government Efficiency. We actually already had one of those before Trump. It was called the Government Accountability Office. It still exists. I like the idea of beefing that up, but it has to be in the hands of Congress because they are much more representative of the cross-section of American people. And I don't like this idea of one agency that just sort of cuts out whole programs. And the second point that I was trying to make is the idea of making the government more efficient, I think in general needs to be much more, let's take a program that the American people have decided we want and make it as efficient as possible, rather than let's cut out the whole program because it's costing money, because that's just not the right way to think about government efficiency. Last thing I want to say here is, despite all the cuts that DOGE has made, and maybe some of them you like, maybe some of them you don't like, it hasn't made the government budget look better. In fact, the latest numbers as of when I'm recording this, we have them from January through March of 2025. During that time period, the federal government spent $221 billion more than the same time period from 2024, January through March 2024. So yes, we have cut some things. Yes, we're not spending money on some of those things, but we're actually spending more money in other areas anyway. So don't be fooled by this idea that DOGE is making any sort of dent in the deficit or making the government sort of spend less money overall. It's not going to save you taxes, because many of the things that they're doing are going to cost the government in the long run. And the cuts have come with offsetting increases in spending elsewhere, so that the government is actually spending more money overall. And I just really don't think this is the way to create a more efficient government. So that's it. Thanks so much for watching and for tuning in. Please feel free to share if you find this to be helpful. Thanks a lot.